He married her out of desperation, not knowing she was hiding from his own past. She came to him with a false name, not because she was a dishonest woman. She had been one of the most honest people you could meet. Once, in another life, in another place, before honesty had cost her everything she had and left her with nothing but a small bag, a borrowed coat, and a name she no longer dared to use. She came to him with a false name and a true heart, and for a long time, one of those things kept her safe, and the other one kept her awake at night staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind move across the prairie and wondering how long it would be before the world she had run from caught up with the world she was trying to build. She didn't know, when she stepped off that train, that the man waiting for her at the platform was the very reason she had run in the first place. She didn't know that yet, but she would. Stay with me tonight, because this story is going to move slowly and it is going to move deep. And by the time we get to the end of it, you're going to understand something true about what it means to be seen by someone after you have spent so long hiding. And if you have ever carried a secret so heavy it changed the way you walked, this story is for you. If you love quiet, emotional Western romance stories like this one, please subscribe right now before we go any further. We have a brand new story every single week, and we never want you to miss one. And drop a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from tonight. Tell me if you have ever had to start over in a place where nobody knew your name. I read every single one. Now let's go back to the beginning. Her real name was Josephine Calloway, but the name she gave him was Sarah Vance. She had chosen it carefully, the way you choose something you will have to answer to for a long time. Sarah because it was common enough not to be remembered. Vance because it had no connection to anything she had ever been. She had practiced in the back of the eastbound train until it came out of her mouth without hesitation, until she could write it without pausing, until she almost believed it herself in a way that a person has to almost believe a thing to carry it convincingly. She was 29 years old. She had dark hair and gray eyes and a stillness about her that people sometimes mistook for a coldness, and was actually something closer to vigilance. She had been watching doors for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to sit with your back to one. She had answered the advertisement 6 weeks after leaving Helena, Montana, with nothing but what she could carry and the absolute certainty that staying would kill her. Not in the way people say things like that loosely. In the real way. In the way where you have seen what the man hunting you is capable of, and you understand clearly that distance is the only thing between you and it. The advertisement had been simple. A rancher in Harlow Creek, Colorado needed a wife. Practical arrangement. Steady home. 1 son, age 7. No romantic expectations stated. She had thought, reading for the first time, a place nobody knows me. A child who needs steadiness. A name I can shelter behind while I figure out what comes next. She had not thought this would become something real. She would later understand that was her first mistake, not answering the advertisement, deciding in advance that it couldn't matter. His name was Edmund Voss. He was 35, lean in the way of men who work outdoors in all weather, with light brown hair going gray at the temples before its time and blue eyes that were direct in a way some people found uncomfortable. He ran a cattle ranch outside Harlow Creek that had been his father's before him, and his father's father before that, and which he intended to pass to his son, a boy named who had his mother's dark eyes and his father's stubborn jaw, and who had been without a mother for 3 years, following a fever that took her fast and gave no warning. Edmund had not wanted to remarry. That was the truth of it. He had written the advertisement in a practical hour, on a practical day, after I come home from school with a tear's coat that nobody had noticed for 2 weeks, and Edmund had understood, in the way that particular moment of understanding arrives, that he was not managing. He was not managing the house. He was not managing the meals or the laundry or the knowing that a child's coat had a tear in it. He could manage the land. He could manage the cattle and the fencing and the weather and the bank. He could not manage the smaller, closer things, and those things were starting to show. So he had written the advertisement. He was standing at the platform on a cool April morning when the train came in, with his hat in his hand, and no particular expression on his face. And when she stepped down onto the platform, bag in hand, gray eyes steady, looking at him with the careful look of a woman, taking a full accounting of the situation before committing to it. He thought, this one is not fragile. He had not known how much he needed that. Miss Vance, he said. Mr. Voss, she said. They shook hands. They walked to the wagon. He put her bag in the back without being asked, and she climbed up without needing help, and they drove out of Harlow Creek in the quiet of two people who have agreed to something significant and are now in the process of discovering what that agreement actually means. Will was at the ranch when they arrived, sitting on the porch steps doing something with a piece of rope, and he looked up at Sarah with the same careful look his father had, just younger, just less practiced at hiding what was underneath it. She sat down on the step beside him without being invited. "What are you making?" she said. He held up the rope. "A knot for the saddle. My pa showed me, but I keep losing the middle part." She looked at the knot. "Can I see?" He handed her the rope. She had learned to tie that knot from her father, who had taught her on their porch in the summers when she was small, and her hands remembered it without her having to think. She worked it through slowly so it could follow, then handed it back. He looked at it. He looked at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "My father taught me," she said, "a long time ago." He tried it himself, tongue between his teeth, brow furrowed, and when he got it, he held it up with the particular pride of a child who has just earned something. She smiled at him. He almost smiled back. That almost was the beginning of everything between them. The arrangement in those first weeks was careful and practical and slightly formal, the way a new structure is before it settles into itself. She cooked and kept the house and walked with to school and came back and worked to the household books, which were in reasonable shape because Edmund was a methodical man who wrote things down, but which had some gaps in the domestic columns where things had simply gone untracked in years without a woman's attention. She was good with numbers. She did not make a show of it. Edmund noticed anyway. He noticed the books. He noticed the way the house felt different after a week, not decorated or changed in any visible way, but ordered, the kind of order that comes from someone paying attention to how a space is actually used rather than how it looks. He noticed that Will was eating better. He noticed that Will was talking more. He noticed that Sarah watched the road. Not constantly, not obviously, but he was a man who had grown up reading Land and Sky for information, and he had that same reading instinct about people, and he noticed that when she heard a horse on the road, she paused just slightly, just for a moment, before going on with whatever she was doing. He noticed that she sat facing the door in any room where a choice was available. He noticed that she had positioned the mirror in the kitchen in a way that gave her a view of the side yard without having to turn from the stove. He didn't say anything, but he filed it away in the part of him that paid attention. They married quietly at the end of the fourth week. The pastor, two witnesses from town, Will, in his good shirt, standing beside his father and watching Sarah with his careful dark eyes. When it was done, when the papers were signed and the pastor had offered his congratulations, Will slipped his hand into Sarah's without looking at her, the way children do when they have decided something without announcing it. She looked down at his hand in hers and then looked straight ahead and kept her expression level, but her grip tightened just slightly, and she did not let go. It was in the second month that the thing from her past began to move. She had known it would. She had not known it would move so fast. His name was Garrisils, and he was the reason she had run from Helena, and he was the reason she had a false name, and he was also, though she had not known this when she answered the advertisement, the man who had stolen 3 years of cattle money from Edmund Voss. She found this out on a Tuesday afternoon in May. Edmund had come in from town with a look on his face that was different from his usual look, tight and inward, and he sat down at the table and put a paper on it, and she saw that it was a notice from the county sheriff. There was a name on it, Garrisils. She kept her hands flat on the table. Edmund said, "The sheriff's looking for a man who's been working a land fraud scheme across 3 counties. There's a warrant." He tapped the paper. "He came through our county about 4 years ago. Sold paper deeds to land that wasn't his to sell. I bought one." She looked at the paper. "It took me 3 years to sort out the actual deed," he said. "Cost me half a season's profit in legal fees. I never knew who he really was. He went by a different name when he sold me the paper." He picked up the notice. "But this is him," she said very carefully. "How do you know?" He turned the paper over. There was a description. Dark hair, pale eyes, a scar on his right hand, 2 fingers fused from an old burn, smooth talker, moves fast, uses women to establish credibility in a new town. She knew that scar. She had seen it across the table from her for 8 months in Helena while she believed he was a businessman and a gentleman and a man who intended to marry her, right up until she found the documents in his desk drawer, all the names he used, all the women before her, all the accounts he had emptied, and the land he had sold that he didn't own. She had confronted him. That had been her second mistake. He had not heard her that night only because her neighbor had come to the door at the right moment. But he had looked at her across that room and said, quietly and with complete certainty, that she would not say a word to anyone, because if she did, he had documentation that could place her name on 3 of his fraudulent sales, documentation he had created himself, documentation she had not known existed until that moment. She was trapped. Say something and be blamed for crimes she hadn't committed. Stay silent and be complicit in ones she knew were ongoing. She had chosen the third option. She had packed a bag that night and left. She sat now at Edmund Voss's kitchen table and looked at the description of the man who had taken money from him, and looked at her own hands, which were very still, and made a decision that she knew when she made it was going to cost her something she did not want to lose. He had to know, not because the law required it, though it might, because he was her husband, and he had a right to know who was sitting in his kitchen, and she had spent too long in a life built on false ground to want to build another one. She said, "Edmund." He looked at her. "I know him," she said. The telling of it took almost an hour. She told him everything. Helena, the 8 months, the documents in the desk drawer, the threat, the bag packed in the dark, the train east, the advertisement, the name she had chosen from thin air on a moving train. She told him her real name. She told him she had not known, when she answered his advertisement, that Garrett Sills was the man who had wronged him. She told him she understood if that was impossible to believe, but that it was the truth, and she had no version of this that did not begin with the truth. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Edmund sat across from her and looked at her for a long time, not with anger, though she was braced for it, with the face of a man who was doing the slow, careful work of reassembling something, taking what he believed and what he now knew and finding out which parts still fit together. Finally, he said, "Josephine." Her real name in his mouth hit her somewhere under the breastbone. "Yes," she said. "He told you he had documents with your name on them." "Yes." "And you believed that if you came forward, you would be charged alongside him." "I had no reason not to believe it," she said. "I had seen what he was capable of." Edmund nodded slowly. He looked at the sheriff's notice. "He's been seen in the next county," he said. "That's why the notice came. He's moving again." She felt something cold move through her. "He'll be looking for a new place to settle," she said. "A new name. He'll need a woman who looks established. Someone who can make him look respectable." "He'll come here," Edmund said. Not a question. He had already thought it through. "Possibly," she said. "He won't know where I am. But if he's working this region, and if he connects the name Voss to the sale he made here 4 years ago, he might come to see what's still available." Edmund put the notice down. "Then we go to the sheriff first," he said. "Tomorrow morning." She looked at him. "Edmund, my name is on those documents." He made sure of that. "I don't know what the sheriff will make of it." "You let me worry about that," he said. There was something in his voice that was not hard, exactly, but was very certain. She shook her head. "This is my problem. I brought it here." "You are my wife," he said. "Your problems are mine." That's not sentiment. That's the arrangement. She looked at her hands. "Josephine," he said again, and again the name did that thing to her chest. "Look at me." She looked at him. "Did you do anything he's charging you with?" "No," she said. "Then we go to the sheriff," he said, "and we tell him everything you've told me, and we let the truth work. That's all we do." She wanted to say that the truth had a way of working slowly, and, in the meantime, causing damage. She wanted to say that she had been through this calculation before, and the math had always come out the same way. She didn't say any of that. She said, "All right." He nodded. He started to rise. "Edmund," she said. He paused. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the name, for coming here without telling you the full truth of it. I know that's not a small thing." He looked at her for a moment. "You came here scared," he said, "and you stayed. And you took care of my son and my books and my house. And when you had every reason to keep your mouth closed, you opened it instead. He picked up the notice. We're all carrying something we came in with. That's not the question. The question is what you do with it when it matters. She sat with that for a long moment. Josephine, he said, not for any particular reason. Just like he was trying on again, getting used to the weight of it. She decided she liked her real name better than she had in a long time. The sheriff was a man named Cole Briggs who had been doing the job long enough to have seen most things and who listened to Josephine's account the next morning with an attention that did not waver. He had the documents that Gareth Sills had used in Harlow Creek 4 years ago, when she described the ones she had seen in the desk drawer in Helena, the ones with her name on them. He pulled a file from the drawer and showed her 3 other women Sills had done the same thing to in other counties. 3 other women whose names appeared on fraudulent documents they had never signed. It was his method. It had always been his method. Keep the women quiet by keeping them afraid. The sheriff sent a wire to Helena. He sent another to the next county. He told Edmund and Josephine to go home and let him work. Gareth Sills was found 12 days later in a town called Meridian, 60 miles east, in the middle of what appeared to be a new arrangement with a woman who did not yet know what she had walked into. He was arrested on 8 counts across 4 counties. The documents with Josephine's name were found in his saddlebag. The sheriff and Helena confirmed that she had never been part of any investigation, that she was listed in their records only as a potential witness who had disappeared. She was not charged with anything. She was not anything except free. She sat on the porch of the Voss Ranch the evening the news came and held the letter from Sheriff Briggs in her hands for a long time without reading again, just holding it. And after a while, Edmund came out and sat in the other chair, and she told him what it said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's over." "Yes," she said. "All of it," he said. "He's done. The documents are done. The name is done." She looked at the field. "You can use your real name now," he said. She thought about that. "I've been Sarah for 4 months," she said. "You've been Josephine your whole life," he said. She looked at him. He was watching her with those direct blue eyes that some people found uncomfortable. She had never found them uncomfortable. She had found them, from the very beginning, like something she could actually rest in. "I'd like to be Josephine Voss," she said quietly, "if that's all right." He looked at the field. "It's more than all right," he said. They sat in the quiet that followed, and it was a specific kind of quiet that comes after something heavy has been put down, the kind that has a texture to it, the kind you can breathe all the way into. Will came out a little while later with a piece of rope, his new project, and sat down on the step and worked on his knot, and the 3 of them stayed out there until the stars came up over the ridge, and Josephine watched the road the way she always did, and noticed, after a while, that she wasn't watching it for danger anymore. She was just watching it, the way a person watches a road when they are home and they know it, and they are not afraid of what might come down it. In the fall, Will started calling her something that wasn't her name and wasn't quite a word, and was moving toward one the way children move toward things they want when they aren't sure they're allowed to want them. Edmund heard it first. He didn't make a thing of it. He just looked at Josephine across the supper table with a look that was small and private and warm in a way she had not expected from a man who had told her in an advertisement that no romance was promised. She looked back at him. He had not promised it, but here it was anyway. On a cold morning in December, he came in from a barn and found her at the kitchen table with the books and the pencil she always kept tucked behind her ear, and he stood in the doorway for a moment just looking at her, and she looked up. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She raised an eyebrow. He came and sat across from her and folded his hands on the table and said, "I want to say something, and I want to say it plainly." She waited. "When I wrote that advertisement," he said, "I was trying to solve a practical problem. I was not looking for anything more than that. I was very clear with myself about that." "I know," she said. "I was wrong," he said. She looked at him. "I don't have easy words for it," he said. "I'm not built that way. But you came here carrying something that would have flattened most people, and you stood straight, and you told me the truth when you didn't have to, and you gave my son back something I didn't know how to give him myself." He looked at his hands. "That is not a practical arrangement. That is something else." The kitchen was very quiet. "Edmund," she said. "Yes." "I know," she said softly. He looked up at her. I know, she said again. I feel it too. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Some things are said more completely in the doing of them than they ever could be in words. She turned her hand over and held his. Outside the window, the December sky was doing something wide and pale and enormous, and the ranch was quiet, and somewhere in the house was making noise the way children do when they are happy without thinking about it. Josephine Voss. She said it to herself sometimes, just to feel how real it was. It was very real. She had come here with a false name and a true heart, and no plan beyond surviving. She had ended up with something she hadn't let herself name, because naming things you want when you have learned not to want things is dangerous, and she had been in danger long enough to know better. But she was not in danger anymore. She was in a kitchen in Colorado with a man who had said her real name like it mattered, and a boy who was learning to call her something that had no other word for it, and a road outside the window that she watched now not because she was afraid, but because it was hers. All of it was hers, and she was never going to run from it again. If this story moved you tonight, I want to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me which moment hit you hardest. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever had to start over somewhere new and discovered that starting over was the bravest thing you ever did. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it right now. Every week, we bring you a brand new story, just like this one. Stories about second chances and hidden truths in love that find you even when you have stopped looking for it. We will see you in the next one.